Aloha mai kako. Today is Friday, March 19th, 2021. My name is Ihilani Lasquanya, and today with me I have Kauwila Mahi. So this is for my honors senior project. And today, Kauwila and I are just going to be talking stories about the movement to protect Mauna Kea, a little bit about his art, him being a student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and essentially how all these things come together. So before I continue with my interview, Kauwila, are you okay if I continue to record this interview?
Definitely.
Awesome, mahalo. So for our first question, when did you get involved with the movement to protect Mauna Kea?
I actually got involved with the movement to protect Mauna Kea in 2012 when I first moved to the University of Hawaii at Manoa from Hawaii College. And the first public hearing that was through UH was mostly for students, and that was the first time I really heard anything or learned anything about the movement to protect Mauna Kea movement, Mauna Kea Ma. And I think some of the people that were giving testimony at the time really inspired me to go and dive further into what is going on in the situation, to learn more about what is the movement that's going on to protect the mountain, but also to protect the people of Hawaii and all of the lands in Hawaii. And one of the first people I heard give testimony was Noel Peralto, and that's 9 years ago now. And since then, I've kind of looked up to that testimony that was given at that time, and then kind of followed through in different movements related to Mauna Kea, different stands, and trying to learn more in depth and get a better relationship or pilina with Mauna Kea and Aina in general.
Awesome, mahalo. And kind of changing gears a little bit, and on to our second question. What is your affiliation with the University of Hawaii at Manoa?
I'm currently a PhD student in the political science department. I'm also a lecturer in the political science department, and I'm the MA graduate from the Hawaiian Studies department, but I'm also one of 6 artists through the University of Hawaii, or lecturers at University of Hawaii, who are going to be represented at the Honolulu Museum of Art this year from 2021 through January 2022.
Wow, that's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing, and congratulations on being featured.
Yeah, mahalo.
That's amazing. Wow, okay, so jumping into our next question, and as always, if you wanted to touch on something from a previous question, or just kind of go off track, feel free to talk about whatever you want to talk about. But segueing into our third question, what inspired you to stand so strongly for the protection of Mauna Kea?
Oh, that's a really great question, Mahalo Ihilani. I think it's a process of many things. It wasn't simply the unethical process that had been occurring for more than 50 years through UH Manoa and through the DLNR and the state of Hawaii, but it's really understanding this long-lasting relationship that Kanaka have with Aina, that is pre-contact, and also how we try to gauge those things through the Hawaiian Kingdom, and how we still try to gauge those things today through many different movements. And probably the most essential thing for me as somebody who's always been a student and always will be a student is trying to understand what does Aina mean, and what does that mean not just to Kanaka but to everybody in Hawaii. And one of my favorite ways to think about Aina and ways to think about protecting Aina and being in relationships with Aina, whether it's through things like Aloha Aina or thinking about Aina in general, is to look at archival material, especially governmental materials. And my favorite palapala that I always talk about is this Mahine who contests Kauwila Mahi Kamehameha Ekolu in 1850, and his right or his mana to rule over and protect over all of the people in Hawaii. And in her contestation towards him, she omits her name in the last part of the letter or her petition to him, and she says, "Uwau no kekahioko huna lepo," or "I am a speck of dust and I am a speck of dirt in your lahui," and essentially what she's really saying is, I'm essential to sovereignty because I am a subject of the Hawaiian Kingdom. And I'm just so grateful for her, even though she's going through a lot of trouble, that made her go through writing this petition to the Aha Kuka Kuka Malu, to the Privy Council of the Hawaiian Kingdom at the time. But it's because of her we can substantiate claims with legally, with legal documents. Like Heli Ika Aina He Kawake Kanaka, man is the chief, the people as servants. And it's not just some far off proverb now. Now we can back up the claim with over 30,000 petitions and people, and this is during Hawaiian Kingdom era. And so since we have these petitions in the court of law and all of these things were heard in the court of law, now we can say, oh, what happened now after 1893, what happened in 1898 after the overthrow or after the supposed annexation of Hawaii. It's not just that the leadership changed, but it's the way that people interacted with their governments changed. One of the most essential thing is like the mind changed at that time, that people no longer were thinking that they were essential to sovereignty because the occupation changed that. People no longer believed that they had a right to contest the state of Hawaii or the territory of Hawaii, because even though every single petition had been heard in the Ahakuka Kuka Malu during the Hawaiian Kingdom era, all of those petitions fell on deaf ears when American occupation started. And most people don't acknowledge it, but the like Ho'opi'i Ku'e or the Ku'e petitions, one of the reasons that we wrote those petitions, anti-annexation petitions in the 1890s, is that Hawaii believed that they had an instrumental role in contesting the government and making them better. And so we still see those pilina today, yeah? All of our people try to contest the government and try to make it better by writing in on petitions or writing in for testimony or showing up to Aloha Aina on the front lines with their body. And all of these things aren't new things. They're new, like we knew them forever. And so getting back into those relationships and acknowledging them and saying that it's something much older than we think it is super important today. I mean, instrumental in how we understand the world, or not even just the world, but the universe.
Oh, mahalo.
Okay.
That's incredible, and thank you so much.
Sorry, yeah.
For sharing. No, it's
good.
You've answered so many questions through answering just that one question where you stand. So I really mahalo you for that. I thought the answer was incredible. So
Oh,
mahalo.
good. Okay.
And so, kind of changing gears a little bit, but I guess everything's connected in one way or another. It's how has your relationship changed with the university, if it has in any way, shape, or form, since being involved in this movement?
I have to think about that for a second and kind of take in the question because it's so good. The biggest change for me, being a third generation University of Hawaii at Manoa student, like my grandmother went there, my mother went there, and I went to classes with my mother there, is that I understand the power structures differently than I had before, and that's made me want to be more involved in community than I had been before. And whatever formation that takes, whether it's trying to advocate for people who are houseless to have more access to food, ensuring that students have better access to their professors or to research available through UH Manoa, advocating more for students and graduate students. All of these things only happened because I was activated through the movement to protect Mauna Kea. And it shifted my relationship to the university because it made me understand how it treats people in a different way. Mm-hmm. Because I had previously believed like, oh, it really is like trying to protect people. It really is trying to be a house of Hawaiian knowledge, or at least presenting Hawaiian knowledge or protecting Hawaiian knowledge. But when I knew more intimately what was going on with the movement for UH to try and destroy more Hawaiian land than has already been destroyed, it really made me think like, or at least made me question: does the university really care about Kanaka Maoli? Does it really even care about Kanaka Maoli issues? And if it wants to be a place of Hawaiian learning, does it have the capacity to do that while it destroys land that many people in Hawaii trace their genealogy through? And not just that, people are sacred and land is sacred because they have their relationships with each other. Dust and dirt is essential to making things sacred all over the world. It's not just a Hawaiian ideology. You can look at the Bible, and Jerusalem is only sacred because the people who go into Jerusalem are on their path towards becoming better Christians for some, is only possible because of their relationship with that specific land and the dirt and dust that's in that land. And so, in an abstract way, it forced me to understand, whether I was ready to or not, the relationship that University of Hawaii has with not just the students and the professors, but with the larger community, and how impactful UH Manoa can be, whether it's in positive or negative circumstances.
Awesome, mahalo. And segueing into our next question, which you kind of touched on this previous answer, it's how do you personally envision a Hawaiian place of learning?
I think the best way now, after experiencing the things that happened on Mauna Kea and looking at other movements that have gone through the university where Hawaiian students had to contest the university to even have a space to learn, like in the creation of the Hawaiian Studies Department and the Hawaiian Language Department, how they literally had to put their body on the line to contest the University of Hawaii to say not only is our ike valid, but we need a place to exercise our ike in our own way and in our traditional way, whether it's through a close relationship with Aina or a close relationship with our hana no eao, like our arts, or with our mele, or with our language, or just ideas in general. We needed a safe space, a pu'uhonua, for all of us to be able to establish. And I think being part of that, as being part of the Hawaiian Studies Department and Hawaiian Language Department, and having been there since I was a kid, has really shifted how I understand relationships in general, and like how impactful or how negatively the university can impact the larger community, and not just Hawaiian students or people going through the university system, but really most of the people that go through, especially Hawaiian studies or ethnic studies or Hawaiian language departments, those are the people who are leaders in community and trying to advocate for the community and reaching out to the community, because most of us in these departments are not only interested in building community, but in serving our community. And for most of us, that's why we went to school, is to be able to help our family, help other people in our community, and try to end a lot of crises that are going on, not just in Hawaii, but in the world.
Mahalo for sharing. And I know that takes a lot of work and a lot of effort, and it's not just something that's personal, but from sharing a little bit about your experience, it's definitely generational. And so segueing into our next question, it's how do you sustain yourself throughout all of this, and this movement especially?
Yeah, that's actually been one of the hardest parts of becoming part of this movement, is being able to support not just my brain and my health, but supporting my family in a realistic way. And I think what it really came down to is having a really, really deep trust in our lahui and the people around that are working and advocating for us, whether they be in students in the university system or people who have long genealogies tied to advocating for aloha aina or really tight relationships with the land. And that deep trust, even though it doesn't always help, it makes it easier for me as an individual to think I don't have to take on a bunch of burden. Like, I know that somebody's gonna look at this thing, so now I can focus on my craft or my skill set that I know can help my lahui. And that's probably been one of the most challenging parts of being in the university while also advocating for Mauna Kea as an aina, but also as a lahui. Like, we are in a Mauna Kea lahui right now, where we're rallying around this aina Mauna Awa Kea, who is a chief of ours, and trying to not only substantiating the claim, but exercising sovereignty in a different way that isn't just theory. It's real, and there's so many things that have popped up, and like, it's probably the most healthy movement that I've seen in a really long time. I mean, I was there in the 1990s with UH when they were advocating for tuition waivers for Hawaiian students, because University of Hawaii Manoa is on Crown lands, and like, even being part of those movements, or looking at scholars that have gone through the university and seeing how they have been treated, I know that they persisted because they had trust in their lahui too, and not just the university, even though for some of them they were protected by the university, but also there were times where the university were very violent against them. And so, yeah, that deep trust is probably the most difficult part about this, but it's also the most rewarding.
Mahalo. And so going into our next question, and also just kind of changing gears a little bit, I know that you're an incredible lyricist and a rapper and artist. So, if any, what specific aspects of this movement, or this movement as a whole, how has that inspired you in any way to continue to create music or to create art?
One of the most instrumental things about this movement is recognizing that what we had been theorizing on papers for a lot of us, or through lyrics, was real. It's no longer an idea that if our people were a sovereign nation, that we would have free healthcare, free education, free university, free all of these things, and not just for Hawaii, but for everybody. It became a real thing. And so thinking about that while focusing on specifically like creating hip hop lyrics or researching hip hop in depth has really inspired me to write in a different way, and instead of thinking with scarcity, like, this is the only thing I can do, I have to be the only person that can do this, I really started to process information in a way where I was like, I'm not the only one anymore. Now we have a whole lahui who has this idea, and now not only that, I want to be able to activate the next generation in a way where not only do they become informed, but they become, at the very least, interested in what's going on. And however they want to deal with that is up to them. I have no right to like be a judge of what they want to do as the next generation. But I think Tupac Shakur is a really good person to quote right here. In one of his interviews with MTV, he says, I'm not going to be the person to change the world, but I guarantee that I'll be the mind to spark it. And that's something that I carry with me as like a person who's interested in building community in whatever way and whatever shape it takes. One of the other things too, for actually the Homa exhibit that I mentioned earlier, is that one of the mo'olelo I'm focused on can be used as a way to understand aina very in depth, and a way to understand systems very in depth. Because it's a story about Kiha and Lonoa Pi'ilani, where they contest each other to rule the island of Maui. And one of the things that happens when they're contesting each other is their relationships get scrambled. But Lonoa Pi'ilani is ruling over the island of Maui, and he's being abusive to his younger brother Kiha Pi'ilani, because he wanted to feed the people, and he's going out of his way to just feed people in general. And basically at the end of the story, Lonoa Pi'ilani and his troops make a ki'i, and it's kind of their last stand at Kauwiki in Hana. And the ki'i is 8 feet tall, and in all stories and all accounts, everybody thinks it's a person until this really well-known warrior, Pi'imai Va'a, who's one of Umialiloa's warriors, comes in, and he's not afraid of anything. He goes up to Kavalaki and challenges him by swinging his weapon, Kahuelepo, which is a dirt duster, essentially. And but it's a wooden club, and it's a incredible wooden club with it's in a couple other stories, like the story of Kauwila. But basically what happens is he challenges the ki'i, and the ki'i doesn't react because it's only an image. And he goes up to the ki'i that people have been afraid to fight against or rise up against, and he pushes it down the cliff. And after that, the world changes, and Maui becomes Kiha Pi'ilani's to rule and interact with. And so that's one of the stories and images that have really driven how I understand Aina in a different way, because of that dirt duster weapon. But that word kahue at the beginning of the name for the weapon is one of our traditional terms for uncovering kauna that we don't use anymore. So you'd say hue ike kauna or hue ike lepo, and when you undust or undirty something, that's when you uncover the meaning, but that's also when you discover what is sacred underneath. When you have that tight relationship with that, with the land, with dust, with dirt, these things that we think are minuscule but instrumental to demarcating what is sacred all throughout the world and all throughout history.
That's an incredible story. Thank you so much for being willing to talk about that and share that. That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I'm excited to talk to you.
It's so cool. And I'm really excited to learn more. I'm excited that this interview is just the first step in learning more about this mo'olelo. I am literally mind blown, so thank you so much.
Oh, I can't wait till you see it.
I'm very excited, and I think to round off this interview with our final question is, if you could say anything to your kupuna and or mo'opuna, what would it be?
I think I would have two different things to say. I think to my kupuna, I would say, mahalo for everything that you've done and letting me access you in whatever way it takes and protecting me. And to my mo'opuna, even if you don't remember my name, I'll always be there for you. Whatever language you like be in, Olelo, Hawaiian language, English, Chinese, I don't care. Just know that I'm there.
Mahalo.
Mahalo.
All right, so that was our final question for this interview. We're gonna wrap up right now, but before we conclude our interview, I just wanted to take the time to mahalo you. Kauwila, your ike and your mahalo is always something that's deeply appreciated.
Mahalo to you, Ihi.
Just besides your ki'iness, in the most humble way possible, I truly appreciate you. And that concludes today's interview. Mahalo.